Maria Alvarez locked the front door of the small downtown pharmacy and breathed in the cool evening air. It was almost 8 o'clock, and the street was quiet except for the distant hum of traffic a few blocks away. She had worked a long shift, helping customers, checking prescriptions, and calming an elderly man who had been worried about his medicine. It was a job she loved, one that let her care for people the way she always had, ever since she was young. Maria was 36 years old, calm by nature, and known among her co-workers for her steady hands and clear thinking. Few people knew about the years before pharmacy school, when she had served as a combat medic far from home. Even fewer knew that her father, a former security professional, had trained her in self-defense since she was a teenager. To her neighbors and customers, she was simply the friendly pharmacist who remembered everyone's name. That evening, as she walked toward her car at the edge of the mostly empty parking lot, she noticed a dark sedan idling nearby. She thought little of it at first. Perhaps someone was waiting for a ride, or resting before driving home. She kept walking, keys in hand, her mind already drifting to the dinner she planned to cook. Suddenly, the sedan's engine roared to life, and it swung forward, cutting off her path to her car. Before Maria could process what was happening, two men stepped out. Their faces were covered, and their movements were fast and clumsy, driven more by panic than by any real plan. One of them reached for her arm and pulled her toward the open door of the car. Maria's first instinct was fear, sharp and immediate, the kind that makes the heart pound and the mind go blank for a single terrifying second. But training does not disappear, even under pressure. She remembered her father's voice from long ago. When fear comes, let it visit, but do not let it stay. She forced herself to breathe, to notice details instead of only feeling terror. She was pushed into the back seat, and the car sped away from the pharmacy, tires screeching against the pavement. The two men argued with each other in hushed, urgent voices. It became clear to Maria, listening carefully, that this was not planned. The men had intended to take a different vehicle, one that had gotten away from them minutes earlier. In their panic, they had grabbed the first person they saw alone in the parking lot. That person happened to be her. Sitting in the back seat, Maria kept her body still, but her mind was moving quickly. She noticed the driver's hands trembling slightly on the wheel. She noticed the passenger glancing nervously at his phone, as though waiting for someone to tell him what to do next. She noticed the smell of nervous sweat mixed with spilled coffee on the floor mat. These were not experienced criminals. These were two frightened young men who had made a desperate decision and were now unsure how to handle what they had done. Maria understood that panic could make people unpredictable, and unpredictability could be dangerous, so she chose her words carefully. In a calm, steady voice, she said, "I am not going to cause trouble. Just tell me what you need." Her tone surprised them. They had expected screaming, crying, resistance. Instead, they got quiet composure, and it unsettled them more than any struggle could have. The passenger turned around to look at her, clearly trying to figure out if she was truly as calm as she sounded. Maria met his eyes without flinching. "You look tired," she said gently. "Long night?" It was such an unexpected question that the young man blinked, unsure how to respond. For a moment, the tension in the car shifted, just slightly, from fear to confusion. As the car moved through the city streets, Maria kept mental notes of everything around her. She memorized the color and model of the car, a dark gray sedan with a small dent near the rear bumper. She noted the direction they were traveling, the street signs they passed, and the faint scent of pine air freshener hanging from the mirror. She counted the minutes in her head, estimating how far they had traveled since leaving the pharmacy. Her years as a medic had taught her that observation could save lives, sometimes more than physical strength ever could. She had learned to remain useful even in chaotic situations, to think 3 steps ahead instead of only reacting to the moment in front of her. Now, in the back of a stranger's car, that same skill was working quietly in her mind, gathering information she hoped she would soon have the chance to use. The driver, clearly the more anxious of the two, kept glancing at his friend. "What are we supposed to do with her?" he whispered, though not quietly enough for Maria to miss it. The passenger didn't answer right away. It was obvious neither of them had thought this far ahead. They had acted on impulse, and now they were trapped by their own decision as much as Maria was trapped in the back seat. Maria decided to speak again, gently probing for information without sounding like she was trying to manipulate them. "I have a daughter waiting for me at home," she said softly. It was not entirely true, she did not have children, but she wanted to appeal to whatever sense of decency might still exist in these two frightened young men. The passenger's shoulders tensed at her words. Even someone caught in a desperate situation could still feel the weight of another person's humanity. For a few long minutes no one spoke. The only sounds were the hum of the engine and the occasional passing car outside. Maria used the silence to steady her breathing further, running through everything she knew about the situation. She was in a moving vehicle with two frightened, disorganized individuals. She had no weapon, no phone in reach, and did not know exactly where she was, but she did have her training, her calm mind, and an understanding of human behavior under stress. She noticed the car begin to slow as it approached a red light in a quiet residential area. Rows of houses lined the street, their porch lights glowing warmly in the evening dark. It was the kind of neighborhood where people walked their dogs and children rode bicycles during the day. Right now, though, the street was empty, and the traffic light glowed red, holding the car in place for a handful of precious seconds. This was the opportunity Maria had been quietly waiting for. The passenger turned around again, this time to tell her to stay quiet and not attract attention. It was in that brief moment, when his focus shifted and his guard dropped slightly, that Maria acted. Drawing on her training, she used a quick, controlled movement to create space and reach for the door handle. Her actions were swift, deliberate, and free of unnecessary force. She was not trying to harm anyone, only to free herself from a dangerous situation. The door swung open, and Maria rolled out onto the pavement, landing carefully the way she had practiced countless times years before. The car lurched forward as the driver, startled and unsure what had just happened, pressed the accelerator out of pure panic. Within seconds, the sedan disappeared around the corner, its tires screeching once more against the quiet street. Maria lay still for a moment, catching her breath, her heart pounding from the adrenaline that had carried her through the last several minutes. But she did not allow herself to linger in relief. Her training reminded her that the moments right after an escape were critical. She needed to think clearly and act quickly. She pushed herself to her feet, checked that she was not seriously hurt, and moved toward the nearest house with a porch light still glowing. She did not knock right away. Instead, she pulled her phone from her pocket, miraculously still in her coat, having been overlooked in the rush of the abduction, and dialed emergency services. Her voice, though slightly shaky from the ordeal, was clear and precise. She gave the operator the make, model, and color of the sedan. She described the small dent near the rear bumper. She recalled the direction the car had been traveling and estimated how many minutes had passed since they had left the pharmacy parking lot. She described the two men as best she could, including small details she had gathered, the tone of their voices, the nervous habits she had observed, even the scent of the air freshener that still lingered in her memory. The dispatcher praised her clear, organized report, noting that such detailed information would make a significant difference in locating the vehicle quickly. Maria stayed on the line, answering additional questions while she waited for officers to arrive. She sat down on the porch steps of the house, her hands trembling now that the immediate danger had passed, and her mind finally had space to feel the full weight of what had happened. Within 15 minutes, a patrol car arrived, followed shortly by another. Officers took her statement in person, impressed by how composed and thorough she remained even after such a frightening experience. Her descriptions were so precise that within the hour, officers patrolling nearby streets spotted a vehicle matching the details she had provided. The two young men, now separated and unsure of what to do next, were located not far from where Maria had escaped. They were calmly approached and taken into custody without further incident. When officers later reviewed the sequence of events, they noted that Maria's ability to remain calm, observant, and clear-headed throughout the ordeal had been the single most important factor in resolving the situation so quickly and safely. News of what had happened spread through the community over the following days. Neighbors and co-workers were stunned to learn that their friendly, soft-spoken pharmacist had endured such a frightening experience, and had handled it with such remarkable composure. Reporters reached out for interviews, curious about the woman who had turned a terrifying situation into a story of quick thinking and courage. Maria, ever humble, deflected much of the attention. "I did what anyone with the right training would do," she told one local reporter. "I stayed calm, I paid attention, and I looked for the right moment." She credited her father for the lessons he had taught her years earlier, lessons she never imagined she would need to use in such a personal and unexpected way. In the weeks that followed, Maria returned to her normal routine at the pharmacy, though customers now greeted her with a mixture of admiration and concern. Some asked if she was doing all right, if she needed time away from work. Maria appreciated their kindness, but she found comfort in returning to her familiar surroundings, helping people the way she always had. She did take time, in quiet moments, to reflect on everything that had happened. She thought about how quickly ordinary life could shift into something unexpected and frightening. She thought about the two young men who had approached her that evening, driven by fear and poor decisions rather than any deep intention to cause harm. She wondered what had led them down that path, and hoped that whatever consequences followed might eventually lead them toward better choices. Maria also thought about her own reaction throughout the ordeal, how her training had guided her instincts, how her ability to stay calm had allowed her to think clearly instead of freezing in fear. She realized that the years she had spent learning to observe, to breathe through panic, and to make quick decisions under pressure, had prepared her for a moment she never expected to face. Detectives who worked the case later remarked that few victims provided such clear, useful information under such stressful circumstances. Her detailed description of the vehicle, the route, and the behavior of the two men had allowed law enforcement to act swiftly and effectively, preventing what could have become a much longer and more dangerous situation. For Maria, the experience became a quiet turning point. She began sharing her story, not for attention, but to encourage others to learn basic self-awareness and calm decision-making skills. She started volunteering with a local community program that taught personal safety techniques to young women in her neighborhood. She spoke about the importance of staying observant, trusting one's instincts, and remaining as calm as possible, even in frightening situations. She often told the young women in her sessions, "You may never need these skills. I hope you never do. But if you ever find yourself in a moment of danger, remember that your mind is often your greatest tool. Stay calm, notice everything you can, and look for your moment." Word of her efforts spread throughout the community, and soon her small safety workshops grew into a well-attended program, supported by local organizations and even a few police departments who saw the value in her practical, calm approach to personal safety education. Maria never sought fame from what had happened to her. She continued working at the pharmacy, living her quiet, steady life, helping her customers and now also helping to empower others with knowledge that might one day protect them. Her story became a reminder to everyone who heard it that courage does not always look like fighting back with force. Sometimes courage looks like staying calm, thinking clearly, and using knowledge and composure to create an opportunity for safety. The two young men involved in the incident eventually faced the legal consequences of their actions. Reports later indicated that their decision that evening had been driven largely by desperation and poor judgment rather than any long-term plan. Whatever their future held, the case became a clear example, discussed among local law enforcement, of how a victim's presence of mind could dramatically change the outcome of a dangerous situation. As for Maria, she carried the experience with her quietly, not as a badge of trauma, but as a reminder of her own strength and preparation. She often said that the scariest moment of her life had also become one of the clearest examples of who she truly was. Someone who, even in the face of fear, chose calm over panic, observation over helplessness, and quiet courage over despair. In the end, what began as a terrifying and unexpected ordeal became a story not of victimhood, but of quiet strength. Maria Alvarez, the calm and steady pharmacist known for her kindness, proved that even in the darkest, most frightening moments, a clear mind and a well-prepared spirit could make all the difference, turning what should have been her worst nightmare into a story of resilience, safety, and hope for everyone who heard it.